Hi, this is I Can Do That's interview series. I'm Jerusha.
I'm Shayna,
And I'm Melissa.
and we are the founders. Drew and I are the founders of the I Can Do That theater company. We work with local kids here in Danville, California to put on awesome, outstanding musical theater. And we're actually in the process of building a 6,000 square foot youth center where we're going to use the power of community, wellness programming, and the performing arts to fuel our kids. And we're so thankful to be here with Melissa. We have known Melissa since we were how old?
I was 11 years old.
We're 11,
I
so we're
came
probably
in-
like
12, 13.
You
yeah.
were 13, 14, getting there.
Yep, exactly. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Melissa, before we get into all the questions?
So I am been Los Angeles based for over a decade now, but I'm originally from Northern California, and I am a singer, and my background is in musical theater, and I have an expertise in teaching and vocal health and vocal style, so I work with a lot of singers as well, but I'm still a performer full-time in my own life, so just moving around through all those different things.
That's right. Amazing. So we all met in the Belasco Theater Company here in Northern California. And so what I have is a list of questions from a bunch of our kids who want to know about what's the life of a singer-songwriter. You've been on cruises performing, you've been in bands international performing, so I've got some cool questions for you.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
Emily wants to know what made you become a singer?
Well, I think like a lot of the kids that are watching and you guys as well, I think you start by just singing because you enjoy it. For me, it really started alone in my bedroom with the soundtracks of all the musicals I loved. So Sound of Music specifically, Singing in the Rain, certain movies that I just grew up around. I wasn't the kid tap dancing along, I was the kid singing along. So to me, I think when I was young, I was just very aware of the fact that that was a language I spoke already, like without even quite knowing why. So singing just came to me naturally because I would hear music and I would just do it. It wasn't sort of a choice as much as it just felt very inherent to do that as a child. So I think it came in pretty organically when I was like 9 or 10, and then they started putting me in lessons just so that I would go do that noise somewhere productively, because it was a lot of just screaming in the house and not quite knowing where to put the energy, right?
So
then I went to voice lessons.
Theater.
So theater, I mean, as we grew up with Eddie Belasco, and a lot of the kids probably know a lot about Eddie, but he came through my voice teacher. I was just singing a lot, and I particularly liked musical theater. I was singing every song in Les Mis. I loved the soundtracks. Phantom of the Opera. I built my own chandelier in the house. Like, I loved it. So then it was like, well, you should go to this place because this is where they actually do musicals. It wasn't just singing then. It was like, oh, you can actually go do a musical. And to me, that was like, wait, what? I can? Like, that's a thing and then I met you guys, and then we all did musicals forever and ever. And that was just so natural too, because we grew up watching them. And I think for us, that was kind of our world before the internet and Hamilton, all these things. We grew up watching those movies.
Right.
And so that's kind of, I think for me, where it really came from, wanting to be Debbie Reynolds and wanting to be Judy Garland and just watching those movies and thinking that's a job.
Right.
People do that. That's an actual job that people do. Yeah.
And how long were you in musical theater? How long did you do that for, and what came after that?
So with the theater company growing up, I joined, and you guys know this, but when I joined with Eddie as a kid, he gave me my first lead at 11 years old. And so it was very like right away I was learning lines and doing all of that. So that whole chunk of time that I was in that theater company, and the great thing about what you guys do and what we had growing up was that you really grow within the company like that. So I was there from 11 and did my last show with him at 18 years old. And I mean, it was back to back. How many shows did we do a year? 2 to 3 shows a year. It was nonstop. And so to me, that was like my training growing up, was just doing those shows every year with him. And then I went off to LA, and I didn't really know what I was going to do when I went to Los Angeles. I didn't go off to a 4-year college like a lot of other people did. So my story is a little unconventional, but I never stopped working. and I never stopped training. And that was the most important thing. Even if I didn't go to a 4-year college, I never stopped taking lessons and actively trying to better my abilities as a performer, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bella wants to know, what was your favorite role that you were cast in when you were in musical theater?
Oh man, I mean, Jerush and I were double cast as Dorothy in The Wiz. That was kind of one of my favorites when I was a kid. But I think one of my favorite shows I ever got to be in was Cabaret, even though I didn't have the lead. It was one of my favorite musicals as a production that I ever got to be a part of, because the storytelling is just so incredible. I think as a kid, one of my favorite roles was Rizzo, when I was Rizzo in Grease. And I think that for me, that was because I had always been told that I was the ingenue, and that those were the types of roles, the sweet girl, that's what I'm supposed to play. And as I've gotten older, I've learned, as I've gotten tattoos and learned about myself as a person, as an artist, I have a little bit more of a edge. I can play different characters. I can play funny characters. I can do different things than I assumed I could.
Right.
And so that was a role that I think Eddie gave me that role. And I remember thinking, oh, you're crazy. Like, this is not right. Didn't you play that role too, Trish?
Yeah, I was Rizzo. Shayna was Rizzo.
I mean, it's like one of those things where for me, I was really confused by it. But it was one of those things that taught me more, because it felt out of my comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I loved that.
Chloe wants to hear, after, you're out of high school and you moved down to LA, like, how did you start your career? Like, how did you start looking at where to put your energy?
Yeah, I honestly, the best way that I could answer that question for anybody trying to get into theater or the music business or whatever it is you want to do, because when I went to Los Angeles, I was trying to get in as a singer into the music business. Now, what that means is just being a vocalist, whether that's singing in movies or being a Disney princess or whatever. I didn't really know. What I have learned and what has held true since I was 18 years old to now in my 30s is relationships. It's all relationships, and it's all reputation, and it's all your ability to be someone that's positive to work with. That's my experience. And so when I went to LA, all I knew was that I was willing to work hard. Like, that was it. That's all I really knew. And all my other friends were going to college, and I had a friend who worked in music, and I begged him to let me be his assistant. That's how I got into those studios. Was I said, please give me any job. I don't care if it's getting coffee for you. I was willing to start at the bottom in order to learn. And in my experience as a performer, you have to pay your dues, and you have to understand that you don't just walk in and get the lead all the time. So that was kind of my experience learning, was that I had to be willing to take any work in order to build my way up to what I ended up doing, later on in life.
Right. So
All
was that like doing, working with the band? Was that, the start to that?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's so funny, because my friend that gave me my first vocal job in the music business ended up being the one who offered me a job on the road.
Right.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, when you work in a band as a backup singer, again, you're not the lead. So my job was to not be the front man and be the one gauging everybody's attention to myself. It was really to support the front man. And the person that gave me that job is really the person who trained me in the studio to do that job. So I think that what I learned in Los Angeles was all the different ways that I could be a singer. And it didn't just have to be one thing or another thing. When you grow up in theater, like we did all train technically, right? We used our voices in voice lessons, and we found our technique, and we learned to be healthy singers. But I like singing rock music too, and Hamilton and some of these other shows, Rent and things, they're not all super technical. So I really came down to LA trying to figure out how I could do all of it and enjoy it, and actually be the kind of singer that could do what felt good and not just be cast in a show, but actually sing, because I love to sing, and pick up a guitar and experiment with what singing could be outside of theater, I guess, which was really interesting.
You guys were traveling internationally, if I'm correct. So Bella's wanting to know, what's it like traveling in a band? What was that? What's a day like in the life?
Oh man, it's like being in a little bubble. When you travel in a band and you're on a national tour like that, you are traveling by bus. So we had a band bus in our team of people for our bands. The band I toured with was a rock band called 6 a.m. It's going to look very theatrical and rock and roll, but we had a big team. So we had probably 20 people touring in our team, whether that's musicians or backstage or sound guys or whoever it is. So we had 2 buses, and we would play a show in one city on a Monday and then go to sleep at 2 a.m. and wake up in another city on a Tuesday and play a show that night, wake up in another city on a Wednesday. Sometimes you're on 15-hour drives. Sometimes you're on a day off in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's really interesting. It's one of those things where you're just traveling kind of like a circus in a little caravan of people, and you show up and you set up camp. You don't really see much outside of your little camp. So for example, one time when we were in Europe, my mom said to me, "Honey, where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Italy, Mom." And she said, "Wow, it's so beautiful." And as I looked around at the dirt field, that I was in at a festival, I was like, well, not really in Italy. Like, it didn't feel like Italy. So it's not all glamorous. I mean, you're still working. And when we were in Europe, we had 16 people on one bus. So you can imagine what that's like for 15 hours on the road.
And you're sleeping on the bus, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's bunks lining a hallway. The coolest thing was in Europe, we had a double-decker bus. So upstairs was all our bunks and downstairs was our hangout area. But you're in tight quarters, you're in small quarters, but you're also on the other side of that. And the most important side of that is that our job was also to go on stage in front of 80,000 people and play music. Like, that's the whole thing about this business, is that it's not all easy, but what you're getting to do when you work is really a gift, because it's a dream for so many people. And when we were standing on stage in Japan and I was looking out over that audience and they love this band, it's like, that's a dream.
Yeah.
There's nothing that will ever top what that felt like, So that's an experience you just don't ever forget. And that's what I take.
How long were you traveling for that tour? And do you remember any idea of how many places you were?
All together, 6 a.m. traveled on and off for 3 years, but that's not full 3 years of touring. It was like we would do a month, and then we would be back for 2 months, and then we would do 3, and then we would be back. I think all together we probably toured over a year in separate stages. But that was also different things. One of them might have been a US tour. So if we're in the United States, we're just here, then we'd go up to Canada, and Canada is a very different country. So how you're navigating through is just, everything changes based on where you are.
Right.
I mean, when we went to Japan the first time, like the second time, this is a crazy story, but we flew to Japan. We arrived and I went through my wardrobe bag, and I, by mistake, had only packed 2 left boots. And I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh, I'm literally gonna have to play all these shows. We had no sleep. We were on 16-hour drives, and within 4 days played 3 shows and went home. And it was just, it goes really fast too. So even when you're on tour, like the tours end quickly and you're like, whoa, that year just went by and it's over, and some bands do that 300 days out of the year.
How do you take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and vocally for that kind of demand?
The vocal routine for this band and for any job you do, whether you're in a musical or in a band like I was, I think your vocal routine has to be based around what you're being asked to do. So our show was not super tough. When we were on an arena tour, we were doing the same schedule every single night. It's like clockwork. So 6 a.m. was on stage at 6 o'clock. Off stage at 6:45. We were all in dinner by 7 and in bed by 10. No, but it was very like by routine, right? So our vocal routine really was, I mean, for me personally, I couldn't stay up late. I had to sleep really diligently. My vocal stuff was pretty high. I had to work a lot of operatic high stuff and high belting. So I needed my vocal cords to be in really good shape. So I was always steaming, overly drinking water, emergency. I mean, just all the basic routines you would have. The tough thing about being in a band, however, is like we're all in quarantine right now, that's not possible in a band setting. So when somebody gets sick, you're breathing that air. Like it's really hard to stay healthy when you've got one person who is, you know, it's all circulating air conditioning. It's really hard. So I think that you still end up, you know, as a singer, we have to do that sometimes. And that's not fun. I had to watch our lead singer go out on stage with 103-degree fever and get through a show somehow. And the difference in the music business in that scenario, where's your understudy? There is none.
No.
So that is the difference with musical theater, is that you can always call a swing and say, hey, I really shouldn't go on stage today. Not an option in the music business. And you really see how hard it is and what the demands are. So when I look at people like Beyonce and Bruno Mars and everybody talks about how they're divas, I'm like, well, really hard what they do. There's no backup Beyonce. You know, she don't have an understudy. So I think it's really tough for her, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it is, you have to be very aware of what your voice needs. That's all.
And protective of that.
Mm-hmm. I always tell my students it's like a piggy bank, especially in that type of job. If you're Elphaba in Wicked and that's expected of you 8 times a week, you're probably not like going to loud concerts. You know, you're just not, because you can't really spend your extra energy just blowing your power, I guess.
Right.
So we definitely had to, but my biggest job on the tour actually was being the vocal coach for the lead singer. So his voice was actually my biggest concern, more than my own. I had to make sure he could sing, and that was the tougher part, because it was a lot of work for him. Yeah.
Wow. So I know something else that you did and have done since is you perform in various ways, but on cruise ships is one.
Mm-hmm.
So Liza is asking, what made you decide to perform on a cruise ship, and how does that compare?
Oh, I always wanted to do concerts. You know, the thing that's great about cruise ships is a lot of the shows are kind of concert style, right? So singers will be hired to come out, and there's different jobs on cruise ships. You can actually go be like any of you kids, if you go off to college and study theater, a big job for theater performers straight out of college is a lot of cruising and a lot of dance and theater shows. Sometimes they do full Broadway productions. The company that I went on with is actually a group of girls that sings jazzy Broadway, and they just book a lot of concerts. So they've created their own show, and they have put together a bunch of songs all of you guys would know, New York, New York, and Don't Rain on My Parade, and big Broadway songs. And they just created their own show, and they bring it out to cruise ships, and it's really, really fun. And you see that when you're out there, there's a whole world of people who do that. So comedians, that's number one, stand-up comedians that go out and entertain on the ships, magicians, singers. It's kind of a whole mix of people, but we're considered guest entertainers. So we go on the ship, we do a show, and then we go home. We're not there for 6 months. We just go for like a week or 5 days, something like that. But it's tough. It's a lot of travel. The traveling is the hardest part, I think, for all this stuff. And you know, any of us that have had to, like, I know, Jerusha, you've done that too, like going to this state to go do a show, or, you know, when you're having to move for work and you're not in your own bed, or you're, you know, just any of it, it's always tough when you're traveling. But, you know, on a cruise ship, you're also like this the whole time. And you're also performing like that, which is the weirder part. Like I've almost fallen over in the middle of our show, but you can't, like, I'm in high heels. I cannot, I'm clumsy. I'm not a dancer, Jerusha. I'm not a dancer. Yes. Dang it.
Great
So, as a lot of our viewers will know, Melissa is a very well-known and popular vocal teacher as well. And she does a lot in person and she does a lot virtually. And so we have a lot of questions around being a vocal teacher and working with students. So Sean wants to know, when is the best time to start taking lessons?
Ooh, I think that really depends on the person, to be honest. I think it depends on how eager you are to really do the work involved. And what I mean by that is singing lessons aren't just coming in and singing, right? I mean, the goal is to actually be developing sort of a routine that helps you get stronger, get more flexible. So with my lessons, it's always half vocalizing, half singing. So we're talking about voice. We're actually trying to figure out how it works. And then we sing songs, right? And then we actually work on applying that to a piece of music. So for me, I felt comfortable jumping in at 9. I was ready at 9 years old. Like when the hour was over, I was like, let's keep going. I just wanted more. I wanted more. And my experience, I have a lot of kids under 10 that may not be ready. And I'll tell them, hey, maybe come back in 6 months, see if you're ready, because it may not be enjoyable if you don't feel focused and excited about that piece of it. So I would always say, when you get excited about the warming up and get excited about seeing the progress,
Right.
That's what it should be about. It should be fun.
Right.
And it should be kind of an exploratory thing. So whenever I see a student who just doesn't seem kind of eager to explore, maybe they're not really into it yet. Maybe they're not ready to sit down and focus for an hour on just that. So I think it's all based on interest, really. Just
Right.
how interested do you feel? How eager? That's
Right.
what I always want, eager.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It
Now, and
makes
you
it much more fun to
Yes.
say that again.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yep.
It totally does. When you have an eager partner, then you can feed off each other, and it's going to go in different directions instead of you as a teacher trying to just give information and
Yes.
bouncing off a wall.
Yes. And it's also, when you're eager, you're willing to mess up, I think. And that's the thing for me that is really tough with singers, is that there's ego involved. And if we don't know what the ego is, kids, it's sort of the judgment we put on ourselves, right? Sort of that voice in your head saying, well, that wasn't good. Me, just kind of naysaying at you all the time. As a teacher, it's actually my job to work past that voice and get students to stop judging what they're doing, but actually start feeling it differently, and that's the thing about singing. You can't like, I can't take it out and like fix it or do anything. I can do that with a guitar. I can take a guitar out, I can change a string, I can change things, I can fix it, tune it, tighten it, whatever it needs, but I can't do that with my voice. So that literally comes based off exercise, and that's literally like ballet bar, doing it over and over. It's physical repetition, because don't forget, it's a muscle, right? If the muscle's not being worked like a muscle, then it's not going to get stronger. It's just how it is. And so a lot of times students will say, well, it's easy for you. I'm like, easy? It's hours and hours and hours. And you got to call my mom and add up all the voice lessons, because that was the work that led to it being easy, or easier, but even as an adult, we still deal with the stuff we dealt with when we were kids. We still deal with the same habits. We still deal with the same personality. We still are dealing with that same stuff. So I still fight the same things in my own singing that I was fighting when I was a kid.
Right.
And just constantly working on being better,
And when, this happens to all of us when we're on stage, and we see this with our kids, is you get on and your voice cracks, or you can't hit the note the way you hit it the night before. How do you work with that as a professional, being in front of 80,000 people and having those moments that are less than what that maybe you're capable of? How do you work with that mentally?
Well, I think what you just said actually nails it. It's like, when you don't do as well as what you're capable of, right? And so in that, we have expectation of what it's supposed to be, which is not a bad thing. I think expectations and goals obviously are important because it gives us the thing to work for. But what is really important about live singing, and it's especially true when it comes to musicians, because when you're Bruno Mars and you've recorded an album and you hear that album, you know what it's supposed to sound like.
Right.
So if you're tired, Bruno Mars, and you show up to your show that day and you've got about 70% of what you normally have, your expectations immediately need to change in terms of what you can give that night and how you're going to adjust in order to give a full performance that night without killing yourself. Now, that's the thing about it, is that's where the ego comes in. For example, any professional auditioning actor will tell you that if they have an audition on a certain day and they wake up that day and warm up, and for whatever reason that high C is not in your repertoire that morning, that song needs to come out immediately, and you need to replace it with something that's going to work for you and not make you feel like you're not able to do what you need to do. So I actually think combating those situations comes with seasoning, meaning you've done it wrong so many times or made the mistake so many times that you learn. And that's how we pay our dues. That's why you start on a cruise ship maybe, and then you do this job, and then you do this job, and then maybe you get to Broadway and you're at the point where you know how to manage two boots that are the same foot. And it's stuff that just comes up, and you can't let it destroy your performance or knock you out of your energy. So to me, being really good at not worrying about cracking is being in a headspace where you care so much more about the quality of the performance, not about the perfection of the performance. We're not perfect. We're just not. So if you expect yourself to be, you're almost expecting a robotic ability to do something that's not human. Right. And it's not real. Like, we have to be comfortable with ourselves every day, and then know how to challenge ourselves to be really focused and really good. And then know when we don't do that, what it felt like. And then go, why did I do that? It's actually analyzing the behavior more than it's panicking about what you did wrong, because you're human. Of course you're going to do things wrong. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
It totally does. And I know, excuse me, I know that it's going to be so incredibly helpful. My coffee is like coming back up to say.
And I keep sipping my huge bottle of water.
Right. But it's really helpful for our kids to hear that, and to know that it happens to them. It happens to all of us. It happens to professionals. And the way that you're getting in your way is the way that you're talking to yourself, and the way to get out of your way. It has how to love yourself and how to talk yourself into the ways that you're talking to move you forward, not towards perfection, but like you're saying, towards giving an authentic quality performance instead.
Right, because if I'm singing, and this is what I always say to my students, if I'm singing and on stage while I'm singing, I am thinking about how badly I'm singing or judging the performance I'm giving, how could I possibly be singing about the words to the song, right? So that's what I'm always telling my students. Nobody wants to watch a singer sing about singing. They want to watch a singer sing about emotion, and they want to watch Evan Hansen question why he can't get in the window and make friends, and they want to see that struggle. They don't care if it's perfect. And I always go back to certain singers I love. If you listen to the original Wicked soundtrack, Idina Menzel's not a perfect singer, but she's such an interesting singer. Yeah. She's such an emotional singer. There's a reason she won the Tony, and it wasn't for a perfect vocal performance. It was because of what she gave to that female character and how she used those words to affect us. It wasn't about how she impressed us. It was about how she impacted us. And that's what we're going for.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I like to teach, because that's how it makes sense. And especially as a rock singer, they're not trying to be perfect. They're not trying to be the next Barbra Streisand. They're trying to be themselves. Right. So I can't tell them how to do that better. All I can do is guide them towards finding what's authentic. Then it's going to by nature be better because it's real.
Right. Right.
It's not really easy to teach, but it's easier to guide, you know?
Yeah. So you're also a songwriter.
Yes.
When did you start writing songs? And Lucy wants to know particularly, how do you come up with your songs? Like, what's that process for you?
I think that songwriting for me came in high school first, and it was just, I picked up a guitar because I just had a lot to say. I would journal, I would say things, and I would say, wow, that was sort of poetic. You know, I want to like write a poem. I don't know what I want it to be. And then I picked up a guitar, and it just gave me an avenue to start creating chords. To me, songwriting is just, it's just like in musicals. It's like when you don't know how to say it, you sing it, right? So when I go through things in my own life, I journal and I write and I'll talk about what's happening. Songwriting can be anything. And that's the thing I love about it. Like I just did a Christmas cabaret, and one of the songs I sang was, I want a hippopotamus for Christmas. Somebody wrote that. You know what I mean? Like somebody wrote that song. And I literally said at the show, if this is a song that is able to be written, then songwriting is the greatest thing. It's a freedom to say things, and it's a freedom to be emotional and honest in a different way than poems or writing a book or, you know, whatever. So it's just, and I am carrying that now into writing the book and score for my first original musical. So that's kind of like where it's taking me. Actually, I think that songwriting has always been a part of my life. I've had a cut on a person's record. I've had little things happen, small things, but I think it's actually been leading me towards the concept of maybe writing a musical eventually. So we're in that now. We'll see where it goes.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. I cannot wait.
We're in the midst. It's a work in progress.
So I have a very current question for you from Ainsley, which is, how has your work been affected by the coronavirus?
Well, unfortunately, the first way that my work got affected was I had to pull out of a cruise contract. So I was actually asked to go fill in on a cruise, and I felt very torn about that because my father is elderly and I wanted to spend time with him. And so that was the first way it was affected. I had to say no to work, which actually ended up costing the other people I was working with work. And that didn't feel good because everybody's trying to work. Those of us that perform, I have another friend, a distant friend through other acquaintances, who just debuted as Elphaba on Broadway, and she did 1 week and the theater shut down. So, you know, I think a lot of people's hearts are just a little broken because they can't do what they are supposed to be doing, touring, whatever it might be. I think it's amazing though that we can do this. And luckily as a voice teacher, I am happy to jump on with any of my students, especially those that see me in person. They're used to in person, but in this way we can still sing, which is great. We just can't go do our performance work. Luckily I don't have anything else big coming up right now, but I have a lot of friends who do, and it's not a good time for anybody. But there's blessings in disguise, I think, everywhere. Because we're all being forced to rest. And I did read something funny that said when Broadway comes back, the belts are going to be clear. It's going to be healthy. It's going to be, everybody's going to be on vocal rest and sounding lovely. So, you know,
So true. So
maybe
true.
a blessing in disguise for someone somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
It's really tough though.
Well, I have one last question, which is, we all grew up in, you know, theater together as kids. And I want to know, how did being a part of youth theater impact your career and impact you as a person?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, just doing theater gave me identity for sure. I mean, I didn't love high school. I didn't hang out with everybody in high school. I was running off to rehearsal. And, you know, it gave me a passion. That was number one. It gave me a language, like I said, that made sense to me as a kid. I was the kind of kid that didn't do great in math and history, and felt like I was almost getting picked on by teachers for not thinking that way and not feeling comfortable thinking that way. And then this made sense. And it was something that I excelled in just by doing work. And so it really gave me an outlet just to express myself, but then also has guided me towards everything. I mean, my first job at 18 was vocal directing for the Southern California version of Belasco. And I ended up teaching with Shanti down there for over a decade, and we did so many shows together. So it also was my beginning of my business. Literally growing up in youth theater led me to my first job teaching. I met the person that ended up giving me my job on the road as a working musician. James Michael, that lead singer, was the vocal director of Belasco when we were kids. Like, it's crazy how it all connects. But theater literally, and joining that youth theater company literally has led me to every major job I've had, for the most part. Literally, for the most part, every major job I've had. So it's kind of everything. The answer is it's led to every single thing I've done, basically. And maybe that won't be true for everybody, but I feel like whether you go off and use it as a performer, it 100% impacts your ability to speak and be confident. And that is what has also given me the ability to start a business and kind of own what I do for a living, because I just do it myself. I don't have a company, it's just me. So, I think it gave me confidence to do all of it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Well, I want to put you on the spot.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't mind, I would love to have you sing a little something.
Yes, I was going to sing, since if I were to pick a role that I could put myself in, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'll do a snippet, yeah? If I were to pick a role to put myself in on Broadway right now, if I got to pick one, it would 100% be Into Waitress. So I love that show. I love She Used to Be Mine, because it's just really a nice song about reflection. So I'm gonna sing a piece of that.
Perfect.
I'm just gonna do the beginning of it. Okay. It's not simple to say that most days I don't recognize me in these shoes and this apron, and that place and its patrons have taken more than I gave them. It's not easy to know that I'm not anything that I used to be, and though it's true, I was never attention's sweet center, I still remember that girl. She's imperfect, but she's kind. She is good, but she lies. She is hard on herself. She is broken and won't ask for help. She is messy, but she's kind. She is lonely most of the time. She's all of this mixed up and baked in a beautiful pie. She is gone, but she used to be mine. And that is the power of theater and of you. Across all of these miles, you gave me goosebumps. Oh, I love it. Well, I started high and I forgot a lyric, but I do love that song. I do love that song. It's so good. It's so good.
Well, thank you,
An
Melissa.
Unwarmed up version. Always warm up your voice, by the way. Bad advice, but that's okay. We're drinking coffee and it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay!
Love you so much. Thank you. You are so inspirational, and I love hearing the story and the whole journey. And I still picture you as this little 9-year-old girl. I remember the first day that you came in to Belasco, and when he put you up to sing for us in front of everybody, and you blew me away then. And your growth and everything that you've created since has just been so heartwarming and amazing to watch.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
And for everyone watching, I'm going to put a link so you can contact Melissa. And if you're interested in voice lessons and connecting, especially at this crazy time with the coronavirus, I know she's offering discounts, and anybody who wants to sing, she wants to help them sing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And if it's for a half hour, an hour, whatever it is, if you want to warm up, just anything, just reach out, send me an email. I'm around.
Yay!
All around. We're ready.
right. Well, we love you so much. And we'll say bye.
Thank you.